Counter-Strike is dying. At least that's what the streets are saying. As is the modus operandi on social media, there's a seemingly endless tug of war between one overreaction to the other. So we've sifted through the nonsense to bring you the truth. Is Counter-Strike dying? Well, in a sense. A swift glance at the player numbers tells one side of the argument all they need to know. There's a pretty obvious decline from the time CS2 is released to the moment you're watching this video, and that is worrying. The game is brand new and it's hemorrhaging players. That's not ideal, and it kind of implies that the new toy syndrome is falling off and people aren't sticking around for the next generation of Counter-Strike. That is inarguably pretty concerning. It's pointless getting new players if they don't stick around, and there are issues plaguing the game as well as the fact that the new player experience isn't amazing. Let's face it, the learning curve is pretty nasty, and CS doesn't really have obviously accessible tutorials or training from the perspective of someone who doesn't know how to use the community browser. Being shouted at by experienced players doesn't exactly help either. If we're not getting new players and old players are getting frustrated by CS2's quirks and differences, that does kind of spell disaster. It's not that simple though. The other side of the argument is that yes, numbers are trending downwards, but it's from a totally unsustainable level. The first week of a new game always sees a huge peak followed by a fall off. Look at New World, Starfield, PUBG, or Among Us. Sometimes the hype lasts for a bit longer than a week, but it eventually falls off. CS is completely atypical in that it maintained player numbers for so long, but this is a completely different situation that we're not used to. How many people who've never played CS or used to play and came back to see what the hype was about will play for a bit and move on to the next game? There's a whole barrage of new shiny games out right now, and even Fortnite's having a bit of a resurgence. For some reason. We don't understand you Zoomers. Most gamers play a lot of different games, and CS sort of requires some dedication. Rarely are people a gamer, they're CS players, or vice versa. The numbers have fallen off, but they're not really any lower than they were on CSGO for most of its lifetime. We've seen times where CSGO's numbers fell off, and we had the same conversation then. CS has escaped more deaths than Jack Bauer. It didn't matter at the start of CSGO when the game was worse than 1.6, didn't matter a few years later, and it didn't matter every other time numbers died. Operations came out, majors were the peak of esports, it always brought people back. We haven't had a CS2 major yet, and we're pretty sure when we do, as well as Kato and Cologne, the numbers will fly again. There is a caveat though, if the game is in the same state, Valve do run the risk of losing some of those players again. It might not matter to some of the hardcore, but the lack of war games, retakes, demolition, and full array of wingman maps just doesn't do a lot to keep casual players engaged. Flying Scoutsman is undeniably fun, and taking away that content for somebody who only cared about war games isn't really going to endear them. They might come back if those modes come back, but honestly the damage might already be done. Even for the hardcore, some of them aren't happy. The AWP feels a bit weird, spraying doesn't feel perfect yet, movement has some issues. Subtick sometimes seems janky when it comes to people swinging into you, and the anti-cheat is, well, lacking. We are getting consistent updates, and we're confident that in a year's time these issues will pretty much be things of the past. But you do then have to entice the players back. Thankfully we have the major and array of streamers who might do so. So, who is right? Are the Doommongers correct that CS is dying, or are the enlightened CS2 enjoyers correct that the game will never die? The answer, as it so often does, probably lies somewhere in the middle, though perhaps more towards the latter. Counter-Strike's ability to die and come back to life is matched only by Wile E. Coyote, and it seems more likely that the Phoenix will be reborn again than be dead for real this time. CS numbers are trending down, yes, but the number it's trending down from was astronomical. CS2 player numbers were always going to go down. It's like if Cristiano Ronaldo complained that his wages went down after he left Real Madrid. Of course they did. There are issues with the game, and some of those are bottlenecking player numbers, but once those are fixed and people watch the major in Copenhagen, history suggests that they will come back and the monster will be reborn again. What is dead may never die.